Hey guys, if you notice, I'm rocking the short sleeves today, which means spring's right around the corner. So hopefully you're as excited as I am to get outside, enjoy this nice weather with your pups. This week we're going to talk about frequently asked questions concerning dry dog food. In the past couple weeks, we really got into nitty gritty and got into the weeds about the differences of the recipes and sourcing and protein levels of dog food. What we want to do is just take a step back, answer some common questions, some common misconceptions about dry dog food. So let's just jump right into it. All right guys, being that it is National Pet Dental Month, I figure we could talk about a common misconception that we get all the time, and that's whether or not dry dog food actually cleans your dog's teeth. And unfortunately the answer is no. It does nothing at all to help out with the dental aspects of your dog. If you think about it, it's no different than you and I eating crackers, and crackers obviously does not clean your teeth. It's the same concept for the dogs. In fact, I would say the opposite. It could lead to long-term dental problems because the starchiness in the dry kibble can stick to their gums and their teeth and lead to cavities, tartar buildup, and other dental problems. Unfortunately, that is a common misconception with dry dog food. Another question we get oftentimes is whether or not dry dog food is the best food to feed your dog. And unfortunately, it's not. We'll talk about why it's not in a second, but right now I want to focus on why we do feed dry dog food. Quite simply, it's the most inexpensive, it's also the easiest and most convenient dog food out there. If you think about it, you just buy a bag, you open it up, you scoop it out, and you're done. Wet food is a lot more messier, it is more expensive, and raw food is a completely different ballgame altogether. So let's talk about why it's not good for your pup. First of all, it has a very low moisture content, which we'll talk about in a second. Also, a lot of the key ingredients are usually of poorer quality than they would be of a raw diet or even human grade canned food diet. And the third component is they usually have a high carbohydrate ratio, which basically means your dog is not able to digest a majority of that kibble and it's just passing right through their system. So let's talk about the moisture content of dry dog food. Basically, it's the same thing as you and I eating shredded wheat. If you can imagine eating shredded wheat for breakfast and dinner your entire life, you can imagine just how miserable that is. That's why our dogs sometimes shy away from dry food. That's also why they gulp down copious amounts of water right after eating. If you think about it, it goes in their stomach, it swells up, it leads to a little bit of bloating, it leads to some gastric distension, a lot of gastric upset, and it's just this constant cycle that just continues. So we always recommend introducing some sort of liquid into your dog's diet. So whether it's adding water to the dry kibble, adding some dog-safe broth, so broth that is free of any type of onion or garlic additives in there, or just putting in some wet food or even some raw food in there. The bottom line is there are some great ways to introduce more hydration, more liquid into your dog's diet to make it more palatable for them when you're giving them dry dog food. One other point I want to bring up about dog food that we haven't hit on yet is how much we should feed our dogs. That is a very tough question to answer. And the reason for that is there's so many different components that go into it. Obviously the size of your dog, obviously the frequency that you're feeding them, and then of course the quality of food that you're feeding them. If you're feeding them a poorer quality diet, then they're going to unfortunately need to be fed more so they get more nutrients into their system. If you're feeding them a higher quality diet, you can feed them less. So let's talk about how we can gauge that. First off, there's a lot of dogs out there, especially breeds such as Labs, Goldens, and Beagles, who will just eat and eat and eat until they just make themselves sick. So that's not really a good gauge on whether or not you're feeding them enough, because most dogs always seem like they're hungry. What we want to look at more specifically is the shape of your dog. Just like you and I, we know when we put on a couple pounds, we know when we are looking fit and trim. What you want to do is look at your dog. You want to make sure they have a nice little curve going inwards to their waist, not too skinny. We want to be able to see the curvature of the ribs, but not be able to count the ribs individually. So they want to have nice good tone structure to them. As long as they're in that shape, then you're feeding them appropriately. If they have a little bit of a bulge on the outside, or they have more of a sleek streamline, basically from the ribs to the hip area, or even bulging out a little bit more, then you're probably overfeeding them. Another good key indicator is the frequency of bowel movements. If they're doing it 3-4 times a day, especially if it's soft, loose, or even diarrhea, what's happening is they're getting overfed and it's just passing right through the system faster than they can actually process it. Those are some key indicators on whether or not you're feeding your dog appropriately. Unfortunately, a lot of the manufacturers out there do tend to recommend on the overfeeding size. So if you look at the charts on the back of the dog food and it says feeding your dog 3, 4, sometimes 5 cups, that is a very high amount. I'll give you a good example. My dog, who is 80 pounds, I give him about 3 cups of dog food a day. So a cup and a half in the morning, a cup and a half in the evening, and to be quite honest, he could probably lose a couple pounds at that too. So if you have any more questions about that, definitely stop in. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about the ins and outs of how much you should feed your dog and whether or not you're on the right track or not. All right, guys, that concludes part 3 of our 4-part series this month regarding dog food. I hope you got a little bit out of that. We really appreciate all the feedback. Just this past week, we've had several customers come in the store and say how much they enjoy these videos, so I really do appreciate that. And we're gonna continue giving these videos as long as you guys want them. So if you have any questions about anything, stop in, give us a call, shoot us an email, DM us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram as well. And we appreciate all of the support you've been giving us. So we'll see you next week.